let him do that as well.
Okay.
Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome to this Talking Song episode. And Leighton, very, very welcome. How are you today?
Good. Yeah, good. Good to be here. Finally.
So I think we've been in contact for actually quite a long time. I know you found my
Yeah.
channel, and we've been on Twitter, and I know you work with Martin, and now you're actually working with me in bedtime. But just going back to it, like how did you find me?
That's a good question, because I was trying to think that today. How did I get to you? And I mean, I've been around the block, and I don't know how you came up. I think I might have just Googled you or Googled Insomnia, and you might have come up. I can't remember the genesis of it. But I think it was you and Martin, or maybe you were doing a talk with Martin. Then I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll check you out. Yeah, it's been a while. Yeah.
Now it was a while, exactly. And in fact, I think anyway, let's not get into there. So you found me online anyway, and we've been in touch for a while. But I think so. You can just actually talk about, like, a little bit about your story, what's happened, and how things have been going, and then I will answer, of course, any question that you have at this point. So yeah, how I know you had trouble sleeping for a long time, but yeah, how did it all start?
Not that unusual to most people. It's been about 15 years, 15 long years. It came out. I kind of remember it. It was so innocuous. It was like one bad night. The classic story, right? One bad night turns into another to another. So it was one bad night around April, and I thought, oh, I hope I don't get that again, and I did. But my theory is, my baseline is kind of like, I'm an anxious person. So for me, it's almost like another thing to be anxious about, because I had anxiety before, but it kind of abated, and it was quite kind of quiet. And then suddenly this sleep thing, so almost became a new thing to get anxious about. And it's been about 15 years. So it's a long time.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right. The brain is this like problem-solving machine, and it kind of wants something to work on, something to feed on, and then sometimes sleep becomes the thing it really wants to work on, and then you get into that insomnia loop there. But all right, so it started with just the one sleepless night led into another, etc. And over the years, has it been that it's kind of waxing and waning? Sometimes you sleep pretty good, sometimes not so much, or has it been more a constant struggle? Or
It's just been a constant struggle. I mean, there's been periods where I've had. I mean, there was a period last year I had about nearly 3 months of good sleep, which came out of the blue and ended out of the blue. But it's a real consistent pattern. So it's 2 good, 3 good, bad, 2 good, 2 good, then 3 bad, 2 good. So there's a pretty much consistent a pattern of poor sleep. And that, there's been periods when it's been not as bad, not as potent, but generally there's been it's been a kind of constant rhythm. Yeah, it's pretty constant.
absolutely. And I think and I know you let me ask you this way: before you came across like my channel and Martin Reed, etc., did you already have kind of a good understanding of why you had trouble sleeping, or did you feel like you learned something after?
That's a good question, Daniel. No, I mean, initially when I had it, the doctors, when you go to doctors and say you've got sleeping problems, they put as a component of depression, or a component of an anxiety. So they treat that, or they just treat it as you can't sleep. They don't understand the complexities of why you don't sleep, or so no, I didn't. And this went on for a while. And only recently, I think I came across the legendary Sasha Stevens book. And I think it might have led me to you, actually. That might be where I found you. So when I read her book, it was like, wow. Like most people read it, it was like, wow, she's been there. She totally understands it. She understands all the crevices, all the kind of ticks. That was the first time I found someone really understood insomnia. And then coming to your channel and coming to Martin's and Michael, it's like the holy crucible. You kind of you all know it so well, and there's nothing on your channel that I haven't asked. But to get to that point, no, there was a good 10 years. You know, you tend to get, and again, it's a classic story, you tend to get medicated up. No one really understands it, and it's like, it's a real genuine disorder. They treat it totally different. Had it been years ago, I'd have been pointed in your direction. It probably wouldn't have carried on nowhere near as long. And I know that, again, is a common story for people, and, you know, that is very frustrating. It's just not, it's seen as other things. It's not seen as like a sleep thing, which is an anxiety thing, if I'm honest. And yeah, so that's where I came. It took a long time. I would say the last probably 3 or 4 years, where I thought, right, okay, I've met these people, know what they're talking about. This is a good place to be.
Yeah. And did you find that when you started like reading Sasha's book, came across our channels, etc., did it change anything for you in terms of sleep, or despite understanding and learning, you found that it really didn't change so much? What happened?
It didn't. I think I think there's an awful lot to know, but I think there comes a point when you know everything and you just have to do it. And that leap from knowing to just doing it is a really hard thing to jump over, because that takes faith and that takes courage. So I mean, you know, what happens normally when you start something new, or you get that buzz, that kind of initial honeymoon period where, you know, it works for a week or two and you're like, yeah, then it goes, oh no, that didn't work, I'm going to go and try this route, and then that works for 2 weeks. You're kind of chasing this high. But it did initially. It was just nice to know that there was that your kind of concerns were being discussed in such detail and knowing. I mean, I know Sasha had it for 10 years. But it's where I'm at the moment, it just keeps going round. And I know I've spoken to you, we've messaged on bedtime, and there are bits where I feel like I'm nearly just there, and then it feels that I'm not. It's, you know, like anyone who watches this channel, it's a very complex, a very bespoke disorder, and it gets you, it claws into you, and it's very hard to face it, really.
Absolutely.
And move past it.
And when you if we go back at that you know, that 3-month stretch where you were actually sleeping well for 3 months, like why do you think that happened?
You know, I often think that, what happened? What did I do right? You know, it just did. Because there's been periods when it's not, I mean, at the moment, I'm probably in the worst it's been, and I'm not sure why that is. For about 3 or 4 months, it's been pretty persistent. Before, I would have 4 days, sometimes 10 days. But at the moment, it's not, and I don't know why. We'll probably get that later. But I don't know. It just was, and I stopped questioning. I stopped doing the very things that keep it alive. I just accepted, wow, this is good, and then your confidence builds. That's what it is. You get your confidence built, and you don't question it, which is what you really shouldn't do. It just happens. And then what happens is you take a tumble, and then that period of good sleep becomes more of a loss, because you've had it for like 3 months. Whereas if it was a day or maybe a week, you can go, okay, well, I've been here before. But when you have 3 months, you're like, I got it. No, I haven't. So no, I don't know why. I don't know why it is. And you know what? Oftentimes you're always trying to get back to those 3 months. You're always trying to get back to those 10 days. You're always trying to get back to that week, or those 4 days, which I know isn't particularly healthy, because it's an effort, isn't it? You're trying to feel like you did back then. Yeah, I don't know. It was weird. I don't know. It came and it went. But what 3 months? But then prior to that, there was a period of Christmas Again, I was fine for 3 months. So that is 3 months over Christmas. Then I wasn't, then I was. And, you know, often it's like anxiety. The more you analyze, the more you know, all the things, you know, you speak about so eloquently, and, you know, all the things that you shouldn't do, you end up doing. But with sleep, it's like catching air. You just got to let it be. But you know, you're constantly trying to get back to those periods of really good sleep.
Absolutely. So I think, I mean, I think you said it. It's like, you know, it really comes from nothing. Like it comes from like, it's like, I think we talked about actually with Sasha Stevens, that thing that insomnia really isn't like a thing that happens to you. It's more like something you maintain by trying to get away from it, if you will. So I think in my mind, there's no question that those 3 months, those 2-3 month stretches, it was like, for some reason at that point, you were actually more willing to be awake at night. You were more, you were not resisting having trouble sleeping so much. You were trying less. You know, there was less effort there. And then I think what often becomes so confusing is that when you then have trouble sleeping again, as we talked about already, was like, then the mind goes like, what did I do before that I'm not doing now? What did I do differently so I slept well? And it's wondering what you did that is then keeping you from having trouble sleeping again, and not seeing that, you know, I didn't do anything. There was nothing. It came from nothing.
Yeah.
And then, you know, so does that ring true?
Yeah, it's you know, it's the passiveness, isn't it? You have to be passive, and it's so unnatural because you're in pain. It feels like when you don't sleep. I mean, I didn't sleep last night, Greg. You're in pain. You ache. Yeah, it is. You're always trying to get back to that to that bit. And I was going to say, you know, prior to insomnia, and I had insomnia before many years ago, and I remember it must have lasted about 2 months, and then I forgot about it. I didn't even remember having it. But prior to that, I had anxiety. So my anxiety was almost exactly the same. I didn't want it. I resisted it. The anxiety got more pronounced. I denied it. I pushed it away. It's almost exactly the same thing. It's just changed its mask into something else. And there's a really good book by a writer called Paul David about anxiety, and it's exactly is in this very same detail which you coach about sleep and anxiety. It's very, very, very similar. And I know Nick Wignall, you know, picked it up about the willingness to have something. So on paper, a lot of the things with insomnia, anxiety sound really simple. You ignore it, you accept it. You know, it sounds really just do it. My partner's like, well, you just sleep. Oh, well, you don't sleep. And I was like, oh, that sounds great. I wish I could say that. Oh, well, you just don't sleep. No, I'm exhausted. So it's, you know, it's the willingness. All these things sound really simple, and they really are, you know, but there's a complete disconnect between knowing it and actually doing it. And that's the kind of frustrating thing. There's days I haven't slept and I'm fine. And, you know, it hasn't been too damaging, but it is a complete loop, and it is like it's stuck to you. And the more you fight, the bigger it grows. Again, you know, same story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can, you know, it's very obvious to me that you have like very good understanding. But actually, one thing I want to ask you was, in terms of anxiety, when we talk now, it almost sounds like you're talking about it in past tense. So how did you feel like you got to a place where that doesn't bother you so much, or?
That's a really good question, because I was thinking about this. So I can almost, again, you know, people with anxiety will sleep, almost have a birthday of their insomnia. It's like my birthday, my insomnia was in April the 23rd. And I remember I had no kind of prior problems. I must have been about 23, 24. I was living in London, and I just someone gave me some change and my hand started to shake. And I thought, what's that? And then it kind of grew from that. And then this must have been about 9 years I had this for. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't do anything about it. I was just I just didn't want it, but it was there, and I was embarrassed to talk about it, or I just didn't know what it was. So this was the 90s, so mental health wasn't as freely talked about as it is now. So I was embarrassed. I don't know what it was. What was it attacking me? And then it just kind of went. And I don't remember what I did. I think I just stopped thinking about it. And I thought, well, why can't I do that now? I did that then. Why is this more potent? And I don't know. It just seems harder to forget.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one thing that I think during our talk here so far, I think you mentioned twice that like it's like on paper it looks easy, but it's so hard to do. Like, what is it that you think of as like that is so hard to do?
Do you know there's many things, Daniel? Right. First, it's a very act of being awake. Who wants to be awake at 3 a.m? Sometimes it can be comical, but there's certain things. The birds start tweeting. Oh my God, when the birds start tweeting, it's like doom. You're the only one awake. It's the very act of being awake when everyone's asleep, and you don't want to be awake. So that experience isn't pleasant. And then it's the next day of just being not your best. But past that, nothing else really happens. Nothing else big enough happens, but it's just when you don't sleep, your perception's all out the window anyway. And I think sometimes having it a long time, it's like another day with this. Not discrediting anyone who's had it, for however long, but when you have it for a long time, you have more memories of bad nights, and you have more experiences of bad nights, and the longer it goes on, the more hopeless you feel beyond recovery. But for me, it's sometimes just being awake. And I know often you say do something you enjoy, and that makes total sense, but it's really hard sometimes to find something you enjoy when it's 3 a.m, you're up in 3 hours, you're kind of going, right, I'm going to read because I know I should read, but I'm not really enjoying reading because I've got to be up in 3 hours and I'm already starting to be exhausted. So I have to force myself to do that. So I think it's just the act of being awake, and it's also the longevity of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand all of that. So in a way, like when you say that it's hard to do, what's hard to do is sort of be okay with that. Is that the thing that is so hard to do?
Yeah, that's the doorway out, isn't it? Be okay with it, because once you're okay with something, it doesn't bother you anymore.
Yeah.
And those days, I suppose, those times when I did have good periods of sleep, I probably got to a point where I didn't care anymore. And I can't remember that, because those things just happen. You just don't care anymore. It's just being okay with it. And and you would think 15 years later, it sounds, I should have kind of got to that point by now. And I'm clearly not, because I'm 15 years still unable to sleep. But yeah, being okay with it, that is the magic. That's the magic of anything.
That's true. It is true. It's when you're okay with it, or when you're like not attached to the outcome, as I've started talking a lot, like if whether I sleep a lot or a little, I'm okay with it. Whether I feel this way, I'm okay with it. Yes, that it is. I think the tricky thing is that then people, of course, when they hear that, go like, how can I do that? How can I make myself okay with it? And that's the tricky thing, is that you cannot, meaning you cannot willfully make yourself think or believe something. You can't. It's not an act. It's not something you can do. It's something that happens, that comes to you, if you will, when you learn, when you
Yeah, it's the desire to not feel like that. It overwhelms the desire to be okay with it. And you're right, you can't force it. You can't force it. You just got to go, okay. And there are days when I go, okay, I'll just deal with it today. And you get through the day and you thought, I just got through that day, it's fine. But it's but see, I have a pattern. So oftentimes it will be lately, at the moment, it's 2 nights good, 1 night good, 2 night bad, 1 night good, 2 night bad. And I'm aware of that pattern. So I think in being aware of that pattern's making that pattern happen. There's also with sleep so much you're not supposed to do, but there's also a lot to do so you don't have so much to do. You know, there's a lot to remember when you're not supposed to remember, like, you know, don't go at this time, make sure you don't go to bed before 12:30. Get out of bed if you feel anxious, read a book, read a book. There's this like treasure chest of like things to do. You go, no. And actually, you know, what should be on the box is just do nothing.
Yeah, and I think, you know, all those things like you mentioned are like individually they can be a great piece of advice, but ultimately, like, I think the only thing is like, you know, what we talked about, being okay with it, befriending wakefulness, and it doesn't matter if you're in your bed, if you're outside your bed, etc. It doesn't matter. Like, but if you try to get real practical here, one thing that I can't help but bring up here is that, you know, you're like, when it's 3 a.m. and then when the people say that, I of course always ask like, how do you know it's 3 a.m.? So how do you feel about that one? The time.
My body clock, I can tell you, my body clock's got a clock. I can tell. I don't look, and I'll take, you know, that. But that's another comical thing. Trying to find your way around the room while trying to put your hand next to the clock, and just like in the dark, you're trying to knock it into things. It's kind of quite hilarious. No, you don't know, but I don't know. I think I've had it so long, I can always tell you what time it is. I didn't even have to look. But that, you're right. That's a big help, just not to look at the clock.
Yeah.
Do you think time, having it for a long time, makes it harder to shake? I mean, I know you dealt with people that spoke. There was one who had it 20 years. I think you spoke to the other day, and I just wonder if that, you know, some people seem to get past it, you know, even though they had it a long time. It's just something I just wonder, is that, you know, what's the difference between 15 years and 2 years, really? It's all about the intensity, isn't it? But I just wonder, you know, if you have it a long time, that's a bigger boulder to move.
Yeah, I think there's no question about that in my mind. Although it is also like you can have someone like, for example, like Sasha Stevens talks about her journey, right? I think it was actually 15 years, just like you said. Like, it was 15 years. But then when she fully kind of understood everything and saw there's nothing there, it's all kind of like a creation of my own habits and thoughts, then her path towards sleeping better was actually pretty quick after that. You know, and you can have someone who hasn't had trouble sleeping for a long time, but they're so scared that it still takes a long time for them to do well. So in theory, someone who has had trouble sleeping for many, many years could start sleeping really well, like just like that, in theory. But in reality, I think it is pretty much impossible. And that's not, I mean, if you had insomnia for a long time, that doesn't mean anything is particularly wrong with you. Absolutely not. There's nothing wrong with you at all. It's just that you've lived with fear. You lived with this fear for so long that it takes a while to teach the brain that there is nothing to be afraid of. And it's almost like nuclear plants, you know, they have this kind of nuclear waste material, and they bury it inside a mountain because it's kind of toxic, right? And it's like every 40 years, it's like half as toxic, and then it's half. It never actually goes completely away, but with time it becomes less and less. So that's more the journey, you know, and that's why it takes longer for someone who's had it for longer.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, I do honestly believe that facing something is probably the most effective thing to do. And for having it 15 years, to be honest, probably can count on my hands the nights I really faced it, because the patterns are so, the responses are so ingrained. I've only really started to, I would say, the last year to really, and actually when I contacted you this beginning of this year about bedtime, I thought, no, I'm going to do this, because I know I haven't really. My instinct is, if I get up, I then, what I normally do is I get up and I go, right, I'm going to go back to sleep. So it's like I'm forcing myself to go back to sleep, but I'm totally not ready to sleep because I don't want to be awake. So that's me going, I don't want to be awake, so I'm going to force myself to sleep. Never works, because why would it? And then that's been going on. That's how I normally respond to it. So I've never really gone, okay, I'm awake. I'm going to sit here and I'm not going to go to bed because I'm not tired. I must have done that. I think I mentioned it to you one
Message.
week that I did it for one night. And God, it was hard. But I thought, I'm not going to bed because I'm not tired. So there was almost this will of the id going, right, we're going to do this. And then the other side going, I often feel I'm starting to do things that doesn't feel natural because I've done the opposite. So I'm starting to go that way when really I want to go that way. So I'm kind of fighting against not so much fighting, I'm choosing another route. I'm beginning to realize the more uncomfortable that route is, it's probably a good place to go.
Yes.
Because it's totally unnatural. Because the natural is 15 years of, right, I'm definitely asleep, squeezing your eyes shut. Definitely asleep, putting a pillow over your head. So it's running in all its forms and variants. So I'm starting to go, no, I'm going to stay awake. And last night, I did it last night. I thought, right, I'm awake now. I'm not going to go to bed because I'm not tired. I'm going to read this book, which actually I was going to come on to later. It's about dieting, and I mentioned that, really interesting. It's about this politician, English politician, who's just lost half his body weight. And his story is very, very similar. And I'll get back to that. I tend
Yeah,
to
we
veer
have to
off.
talk about that for sure.
Yes, I tend to veer off. So where was I? Yeah, so last night, so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, right, I'm gonna go to bed. My partner's asleep, makes me very angry because he's snoring, which is like a prod. I'm asleep, you're not. I hate him. So then I thought, no, I'm gonna stay here. And I could hear the birds. I thought, right, I start work at 7, so I work in care, which is not a great place to be when you're tired. So I thought, right, I'm going to stay here. I'm not going to go to bed. And I went once, then I went, no, back out. And so it's almost like I can feel this thing that I'm doing that I've never really done before, which makes you feel like I'm doing something right because I've done the same thing for 15 years, the same response. And like you said about Sasha, I understand it. I'm beginning, every time I get through a night doing the opposite of what I normally done, I'm starting to get an understanding of what I done 15 years. Very slowly, very slowly. It's like, oh, okay. So then the next night I'm all ready for it. And then I get a bit more courage.
Honestly, Leighton, like when you said that, like I feel this is so uncomfortable, and I think that must mean I'm on the right track. I'm literally getting goosebumps. I'm like, yes, 100%. That is it, and that is also why. And this is why it gets so tricky, because you're basically starting that process of facing the fear and teaching the brain, no, there's nothing to be afraid of. When of course the brain is like trying to tell you, because it's a survival machine, it's gonna try to tell you to do it's gonna be like, no, what are you doing? You're crazy. And that's why you have this extinction burst. So when you have even more struggle as you begin to do what's uncomfortable, that is a receipt that you are on the right path.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's not easy because you're not used to it, and it's easier to hide. It's not easy thing to do, but it's like, I mean, getting back to this diet book, he's lost half his body weight, and he was just saying how incredibly difficult it was, and how he had to change his habits. And I thought, my God, there's a real through line here. To want to change something, whether that's anything, you have to go through a period of pain, and I've been avoiding that for a long time because I didn't want to feel it, even though you end up feeling it, paradoxically. So now I'm gonna know I have to put myself in that position because I want things to change, and for things to change, you have to own it, and you have to kind of go, right, you're going to do this or not. There has to be a kind of hard line to it. Otherwise, nothing changes. And you can apply that to anything, relationships to jobs you don't know, anything you want to change. It's so easy to not and to run. And I think the thing with insomnia as well, there's no date. You don't go, right, if you do this, in 2 months' time, if you carry on doing that on this day, it's going to change everything. So, there's the fear of the unknown, and also reading other people's stories of their success and how quick it came. it's also really, really not helpful. And I used to do that quite a lot. Thought if they're fine, I'm doing this. What am I doing wrong? So it's that, and I can see that choice, and it's not an easy thing to do, but it's the only thing to do.
And 100%. I love this. I love where this conversation is going, and they say like the awareness precedes change. That like in your case, it would be kind of like you've seen what you need to do, and now you can do it, so to speak. But I think honestly, awareness is change. Like you all only just by thinking I should go to where like I don't want to go. Just by thinking that you have already taken the first steps.
Yeah. And I don't know why it's taking so long. I mean, I always get when I go through, when it's a really bad spot, and it's been a bad spot since October, and I mean, it's been stressful at work. I have to say that's probably hasn't helped, but it's been a protracted. Normally, the breaks I used to get from this hasn't happened, and I don't quite know why. But you mentioned it's almost because I'm defying it. It's getting more angry, and it's like the kid, like you said, grabbing the back of the seat, and I just have to keep plowing through, even though because the thing is, you feel terrible anyway the next day. So I'd rather feel terrible on my own terms, than terrible on theirs insomnia, which is ridiculous to talk about something that's outside of you, isn't it? It's just
in a way, yeah.
Like there's nothing. Yeah. But the name, and even the name, even the name raises. When I talk to my partner, he talks about anxiety, never says sleep. And I think that's really wise, because as soon as you say insomnia, that word is so loaded. Mm-hmm. Exactly. But it's
that's a good point. And absolutely. And what was it? I wanted to say something right now, but then I got sidetracked. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I did two things that we have to talk about, definitely. And one is the book. Let's go back to that in a second. But I think this is another. I want to say something I think is really important here, which is it is so easy to get into this place of like frustration, anger, hopelessness. But it's so important to talk about like why you feel frustrated, because it really is like frustration by definition comes from like being upset because you're unable to achieve something. That is frustration.
Yeah.
And then when you think about it, like what is it that I'm frustrated that I can't make happen? Well, with trouble sleeping, let's call it that. It is like I was not able to make sleep happen, and I feel frustrated because of that. And then you add to that the knowledge that it is literally biologically, physiologically impossible to make sleep happen. And then you see it. Like, I'm frustrated because I couldn't change my hair color to blue. Like, I'm going to make my hair blue. I couldn't make it blue. Why am I so? And it really is that.
Why is the rain wet?
Yeah, right. Which then, sorry, Liam, but just to finish this one off, like, I think when you see that, I think there's no other path. Like, it just leads you towards self-compassion. It leads you towards self-compassion. Like, just, okay, I had this for 15 years, and that's okay. I didn't sleep last night. I'm not going to blame myself for that. I didn't do it.
Yeah. And that's a really important component, because for years, you've been kind of punishing yourself and being angry at yourself for, like you said, to achieve something that if you try really hard, it's impossible to. So to really take a step back and go, right, okay, it does take the edge off it, definitely.
100%. I'm so glad. I think I'm really glad with this conversation is going, Leighton. And now to go in a completely different, or not completely, but in a little bit different direction, weight loss. I think let me share some thoughts on that, and let me hear what you think about it, because I think what's so confusing about it is that when you're overweight, you want to lose weight, all you hear is like, okay, you gotta get on it, like get on the treadmill, do this diet, and you'll do it. And in theory, of course, that is true. If you eat less, exercise more, yeah, you will lose weight. That is true. But it doesn't explore why is it that you've gained weight? Why is that? And you'll see that it comes from the same place. When we eat simply because we're hungry, then we're full, we stop eating, we will not gain weight. we will remain in a quote unquote healthy way. But when things change there, and when there are emotions inside us that we don't want to experience, such as boredom, such as anxiety, and we start to eat to buffer those emotions, that is when we start gaining weight. And so it is so interesting that the weight loss, it is a spiritual journey. It is a spiritual journey. It's about understanding yourself, understanding your thoughts, understanding why you're doing things. It is the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, this guy Tom Watson, for any UK viewers, he's a Labour politician, and he was absolutely huge, and he did all the things which is similar to what I've done, in terms of you try different things to make, but you're not really committed to something, you're just trying it. So he tried all these different types of diet and it didn't work, and then he just got to a point when he went, no, this has to be addressed. And he addresses the emotional attachment for food, and also the work he had to do, the absolute work he had to do. And I think with a lot of diets, and I find this quite similar to, because I've been everywhere, like most people have. You have sleep or anxiety issues, you try every single thing because you want it to go straight away. You don't really want to do that much work, because you just want it gone. That you don't want to do work. It's like, no, that's too hard. It's too hard. And then he got to a point where no, so he was getting up at 5:30 in the morning. He basically overhauled his whole diet, no sugar, no, and literally he is half the person he was. And he said, this is what I have to do now to stay this way. And it just thought, God, that is so similar. You have to kind of work at something. You have to sweat. You have to get to a place. You've got to go through. You've got to go through things. And like you said, it was the emotional, and it is a spiritual journey. With all this, with not sleeping, because it's your soul's kind of involved.
Yeah, it is. And by the way, for somebody that's tuning in here, like when I say spiritual, I simply mean like learning about yourself, looking inside, and kind of exploring yourself. That it is a journey of that. And you're right, like that kind of that part of like going towards the pains is going towards your discomfort. That is work. But then I think, once you've gone there and you started to really see that, this is the path, and you start to see this is the way, then it becomes less and less work, until one day it's not that much work.
Well, that is the thing, isn't it? You want to know that this is going to change on this day. You want specifics when you don't sleep. You don't want this vague kind of like, it could happen. You always want, well, if I do this, but it doesn't go A to B, does it? It goes A to Z, it goes back again. And, I think sometimes with sleep or any kind of approach, there is an element of commitment. And sometimes in periods when I had it, probably wasn't that ready to be committed to it.
Yeah.
There's times I might have started something, because I think I've done most of them. And in theory, I read it and I thought, yeah. And then after I read it, it's like, nothing's changed. Why hasn't anything changed? Yes. I read the book twice.
Yes.
And then when you realize, oh, hold on a minute, you've actually got to put yourself in positions you haven't done for a long time, and it's not going to be comfortable.
And speaking of that, commitment is like, and commitment / effort is, I think, is a very good teaching point for everyone that tunes in here. Like when you're doing anything and then afterwards you're like, well, I'm not sleeping any better. Why not? And that just shows that you were looking for something to make yourself sleep.
Whether those things come very tricky, because you're going, well, I'm going to do this. Actually, your subconscious is going, I'm doing this because I want to get this. And that is like quicksilver. It's like, it's kind of like, it's behind the scenes, and it's and it's doing it for another reason. It's almost like it's just trying to con you. But you're right. I mean, if you go, right, I'm going to do this, and whatever the result is, I don't care. I'm going to carry on living my life anyway. And then, but you always got one eye on the prize. That's quite hard to, you say, I'll do this because I know that it will, because I'll just do this. But on the back of your head, you're going, well, you're doing this because you really want to get there. It's quite hard to go, right, no, that's not the case. I'm not going to have any attachments to it at all, and I'll see what happens.
Yes.
But on the back, there is always that, yeah, but really you want it, don't you? Otherwise, why would you be doing it?
100%. And, you know, I think here, I think just the awareness is the importance. Like, if you don't have that awareness, that in the back of your mind, you probably do this in a way to sleep more, then you're kind of fumbling in the dark. Then nothing's going to happen. It is not going to be helpful. But if you're doing things and you're kind of questioning, like, is this an effort or not? Maybe not. It doesn't really matter if you kind of get to the root of what exactly you're thinking about. Just awareness of this, awareness of efforts, awareness of it. I think that's really the most important, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that is, because I hate to use the word journey, but it is a journey. And you know, it, like you said about food, it's definitely, there's parts of you have to face, there's parts of you have to come to terms with, and they're huge things, you know, and these could be years and years and years of habits, beliefs that you're having to unravel or confront, and it's really, really hard. Sorry, Daniel, I have no idea where I was going with that. It was a good place and I can't remember it. Beliefs. Yes, no, totally gone. Sorry, long day.
Yeah, I think maybe this will spark your memory. You started off by saying, I hate the word journey, but it kind
That's
of...
it. Yes. I like the word recovery because there's always I know lots of people don't like that word, but I like the word. I know, you know, to recover is to be reborn. I quite like that. Journey, it is a journey. It is a complete journey. Mental health, anxiety, insomnia, there is a real journey. But because there's no traditional, it's not like a film. It's not like you battle the demon and then suddenly everything falls into place. It's incremental, you know, and I think most people want definites, and I totally get that. They want to know if they do this, this is going to end because they don't want it anymore. But like you said, not wanting it again is a resistance. So there is a point where you just have to go free fall. And I'm getting that more and more each day since I've actually contacted you and we did the bedtime. I'm finding I'm ready to do it. And that's another interesting thing. You have to be ready, and sometimes you're just not ready.
No.
It's like the diet. Sometimes you're not ready to lose weight. Sometimes you're not ready to put down that food because it makes you feel X, Y, and Z. Sometimes you're not ready to recover. So you can read the books and you can attend the course. It doesn't mean you're ready to do it. You have to really, really want it and surrender to it, you know.
Yeah, I'm having like goosebumps moments all the time here. You're so right. And I think this is something I don't think I've ever talked to, actually, which I thought a lot about, which is really good for anyone tuning in here, which is that if you come to this channel or you read a book and then nothing really changes, well, that may be because you weren't in a place where you were ready for that commitment it takes. And that just should, and there's no judgment there. No, don't be hard on yourself. Don't judge yourself. Maybe it just wasn't the time right there. And you will get to a place where, like, I think this is the time. So I think it's important.
Yeah, and also there's another question, Daniel, and I wonder what your thoughts on this, because we all know how isolating insomnia is. It is very isolating. You're on your own. You're awake when everyone else is. You get through the day feeling no one else knows what you're getting through. Everyone talks about their wonderful sleep. There's a lot of things that makes you feel kind of adrift. Now, when I have a bad day, I come to your channel and with Michael, and you'll do the talks and some of the things. It makes me feel better, but there is a thin line, and I find myself on bad days probably being a bit more obsessive about coming back to your channel or reading people's success stories, and I have a feeling that's probably not very good for me, but it does help to have some kind of community or to hear other people's stories, because it is an isolating feeling, but also that I can see the dependency on that can be quite problematic. I just wonder what your thoughts on that, and how much is too much, you know, or is that again an element of compassion?
Yeah, that is a huge element. It's that when you, let's say you tune in, you hear some video about somebody who like is doing fantastic, and then you feel like, dang it, like why am I not there? Like why am I still right?
Yeah.
Then yes, absolutely, the self-compassion is super important. Be like, I'm not gonna be hard on myself with that. Again, there's no failure. I can't fail in doing something impossible. That is huge. But then there's the other component of like, often people tell me actually that they're like, Daniel, like I'm just obsessing on your channel. Like, is that really helpful? And my first thing is that when somebody is completely new, I say like, if you're just learning, if it's just education, keep going. But you, Leighton, I think you're way past that stage. You already know everything you need to know. So for you, it's more like sometimes you need a little bit of like support, like feeling like you're not alone. And I think it's a judgment call, meaning if you overall feel like tuning in here and there, like the pros outweigh the cons. Like you overall feel like, I think this is a part of my journey right now. This leads me forward. Most of this, like it mostly leads me forward. Then I think it's good to tune in. But when you get to a point where you're like, oh, again, it's like a question of being ready. It's like when I think like, no, I think I feel like tuning in because I feel like I need some hope. But then you're like, but you know what? I think it's time for me to actually not do that.
Yeah.
Then
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
it's time to tune out.
And I've started to do that, and it makes me feel better, because there are times when I go, I really need to hear a story. Then people are still struggling. I want to hear a story where they're doing. I don't want to hear a story they're doing well. I'm not doing well. Why should they do well? So you kind of go to the. But I kind of thinking, yeah. My partner said to me, interesting. You mentioned. He said to me the other day, because I go through waves and it's really bad, and I'm finding everything difficult. And he said, you know everything. And it was just, you know everything. And just hearing, I thought, yeah, I do. He said, just do it. And again, sounds simple, but sometimes you need that simplicity fed back to you, because you know what I mean? You don't, yes, there's an element, there's a point where sometimes you need someone to go, just do it. You got it. You can
Yeah.
do it. Just do it. And he's not very good at mollycoddling. He's not very good at saying what I want to hear. He's really good at telling me. He's a teacher. So he just tells me, just do it. And I was like, God, he's right. Just do it. So yeah, I mean, I feel I'm moving into new territory. And I kind of and the way I'm kind of responding is giving me a bit of hope. That I'm doing the right thing, even though it's it can be agony at times. And I'm sure anyone listening to this feels exactly the same. And I often see the comments and people say, the thing about insomnia, you're so common. There's nothing special about you. Everyone says exactly the same thing. There is nothing. People go, well, I've got it. No one talks about it. No, it's not. We're really boring. It's exactly the same. Any kind of question any kind of question you have answered. I've often said, well, Daniel, and then I'll tune and go, oh, damn, he's answered that one. I've got nothing left. It's boring. We're no different, which is in itself liberating.
Right. And when that, sometimes clients get to this point where like they're so, when you're fed up and you're kind of tired of it, that can take you in two directions. Like one can be the direction of resignation, which is not helpful at all, which is like, I've given up, I can't do anything about it, which is not helpful. But that when you're fed up, it can also take you towards like, I'm fed up, I'm done with the struggle, I'm not going to fight it anymore, I'm going to face it, but I'm not. And so it can be, when it's kind of boring and you're fed up, like that can actually be really good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I'm having that a lot more, where I just think, God, I've tried just just give up. It's resignation is totally different. You're right. It's to give up the struggle, which is which is the invisible themes that doesn't exist. I think you're right. You just go, I just give up. I'm going to carry on living my life. If I feel like this, I feel like this. This is where I am now. I'm like, well, okay, I went to work today. It felt dreadful. I'm a manager. People ask me a million questions. I thought, well, it's here. So just stay. I'm going to get on with my day. Tomorrow might feel better, but I'm just going to get on with today. And that kind of attitude, slowly it's chipping away old habits. And I'm
Yes.
starting to see things a bit differently. Because I've had many years of responding exactly the same way, night after night after night.
Yes.
You know, this the theory of madness, isn't it? Doing the same thing and expecting
Yes,
different results.
it is true. That is true.
And that is insomnia in a nutshell, doing the same thing over and over again. It's crazy. So, you know, my advice, anyone to this is just to, where the wind's facing, face the other way.
100%.
You know?
I think, you know, to conclude here, I want to say, like, I'm super happy with all that you said about like going where the discomfort is, changing habits, all that. And then when things are, you know, self-compassion also super important. So yeah, I think
Definitely.
we'll conclude there, and I'll continue working with you. And I think it's tricky, but I think you're on a really good path, Leighton.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Daniel.
Luck soon.
Okay, bye.